I suppose good evening to the coaches and good afternoon, or good evening from here and good afternoon over there. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present the follow-up. And as Matt says, different, but there's lots of overlap between the two presentations. You didn't have to have listened to the first to certainly associate some coaching support with the second one. So one of the things that I found really important in coach development has been the strive to get coaches to understanding how we learn. So it's not so much the knowledge of the sport. Coaches like to feel the need to sort of validate their knowledge to participants, but it's really important that the vehicle for that transfer of knowledge through a recognition of how we learn. And I've put together what I've called here is the Magnificent Eight. So and 8 themes really, and I will just make sure that these follow with a short video. So what you can see from the first slide, which is really important, this was a photograph from actually a presentation I did in Canada 2 years ago, and you can see adults playing with balloons. When we think about what did I learn, I think about what did I feel when I was learning. We always like to associate ourselves to positive emotional experiences. We reflect on a positive emotional experience. You can see people relive something they enjoyed almost as though it was yesterday, and we're a lot more receptive to learning when we have a positive emotion to it. So I'd set this room. There were 60 coaches over in Vancouver, and we just started blowing balloons up. There's a little bit more to it than that, but the simplicity of the connection with this childhood activity of playing with balloons, people were very animated, very engaged, and you could tell that what followed next was on the back of a very positive start. So if I show you the second one here, which is 2 coaches who I've worked with, they're not in a museum or an art gallery, just happened to be the room we worked in, but just take a note really of what you see. So when I show that to coaches, it's always really well received. I think that's because being a child in a lot of them is full of fighting to get out. But there's so much in that short clip, and all it is 2 adults catching deflating balloons. Simple, but if we were to play it again, I think, well, what do my sessions look like? What if I was to turn the volume down? If I was to turn the volume down, what would the expressions on the participants' faces be like when they're taking part? And equally, if I was to close my eyes and listen, what would I be listening to? And you can draw lots of learning from that in terms of how much the desire to catch the balloons was. So, such was the aspect of that simple skill, which is so enjoyable. They thoroughly engaged in it, and they really wanted to complete it. So, positive environment, great emotional experiences. What will people reflect upon? And when they do reflect, what will they be able to talk about? The second one, I've heard of this phrase, which was on a webinar I did a couple of weeks ago, and but I called build relationships. And when we're coaching and when we're developing good learning environments, we try to look at a phrase called connection over content. How am I connecting with the people I'm coaching? So if we were to put content to one side, the skill we're trying to teach, what precedes that? How do you build those relationships with the people you work with? I like a phrase that I had from a student a couple of years ago, and I said to him, "I never knew that," and he said, "Yeah, but you never asked." And I thought, well, that taught me a lot about how much effort I'd taken in to knowing him beyond, you know, his a student life really. If I show you this clip here, so this is a clip um, of in this room 150 ladies and gentlemen who work in community sport in across the country. So they work with refugees, they work with walking football projects, a project for isolated communities, work for a lot of charities. And I had the room for them. Many of them don't know each other. So I thought, well, how can I get them to learn, get them to engage in what I'm doing, which would involve a lot of interaction. But before the interaction, how did I make them feel at ease with one another? So I gave them a card exercise, which was about to find out about one another, simple questioning. And if you just listen to the atmosphere in the room, oops, sorry. This went on for, I'll just play it once more. I want to ask you a bit of a question in a second. Sorry, that's twice now. When you look at this clip here, just see if you notice something. So really important. What was the connection like with the people in the group? How was I connecting with them? And you could see that there was a very nice interaction between the group. And this went on for 20 minutes. I hadn't even started delivering anything yet. And it was 20 minutes. And I said to them, when should I stop? And they said, well, we're quite happy talking. We're quite happy spending time understanding one another. So the activity that followed was really easy because we had a very captive audience, ones who were relaxed, ready for the next stage. And it really enabled the next 40 minutes of the session to flow really smoothly. If I show this video again, we're going to move on to another slide which follows on from the building relationships. And one of the things I also wanted to pinpoint, not quite sure if you can see this. I'm just circling this lady over here with an amazing Mohican, same age as me, 53. We'll talk a little bit about the art of noticing later on. So what are you noticing when you're with groups? What do you notice in the room? What do you notice from the performance? So we have a positive environment where we've built relationships with those we're going to be working with. And then the next slide here. Again, on the building relationships. So a short video here. This is myself prior to a race, a cyclocross race, just riding part of the course with my daughter, 8 years old. And you know, we have a relationship which is obviously close, but what we're trying to do is making sure that when I what's that relationship look like in practice? How do we work together? If we have that good rapport, that good understanding, we can work close to each other, one another. And what I also wanted to say is that in that clip again, I'll just show you one thing, particularly with coaching and learning, is that sometimes learning is not a race to learn. We need to go alongside the pace of the learner. So they will very much dictate the pace, but we can shape that by how we manage that learning process. Okay, so just a picture. I mentioned the lady in the room with the Mohican. It's just about take more noticing. The art of noticing. It's the small things that we can often pick out from a performance from the people you coach, that can make a real difference. So if we're struggling to find something obvious in that performance, there'll still be something that will stand out. I'm not quite sure if you can see what I'm looking at in this image. There's something which stands out. And I appreciate this is a one-way dialogue, so you're not able to kind of put your hand up or shout out. But I'm just going to circle here. Get the mouse up. Okay. So to the left of the screen, with the arrow, just the lady here, on the back of her dress is a security tag. So obviously bought the dress, didn't take the security tag off. And when you show this image to a group of coaches, there's a bit of time. Some people notice it straight away. Some people most prominent image on the screen. And so I think if you've got a group of participants, are your eyes drawn to the periphery? Are you looking at the whole landscape rather than just that one person that stands out? So it's really important when we're coaching that we're noticing as much of the landscape as we can. What are people doing? What small comment could I make that makes them feel that I am fully aware of their challenge, if they're struggling, also their performance, if they made a successful shot or an adjustment that has said, I've seen that, and then I think I am being noticed. So that effort then changes because the effort they're putting in is being noticed by the coach. Have a look at this next video, so 30 seconds. There's plenty in here now. I'll be very careful when I taught the art of noticing, but just have a think of what you see in this 30-second clip. Okay, so you ask a group of coaches what they notice from this clip. You get a variety of responses. Ones that talk about the team that won, the reaction of the non-participants. So I'm going to play this again, and what I'd like you to do is I'd like you just to concentrate on two things. I'd like to concentrate on the bottom right of the screen. I'd also like you to concentrate on this student here. These are all my students, or some of my students. So, oops. So let's watch the performance again. Okay, so I'm going to play this again. I'm going to stop it at two particular points all the way through. Okay, so I've stopped that halfway through. So this is about reaction time, speed, transition, moving from one place to the next. So when I asked coaches what they'd seen, they looked at, again, the winners and losers, but what I was keen on noticing was this student here, kind of standing like a lamppost, basically. In other words, didn't have the stance that you might want from, a basketball player, an invasion game player, sevens, rugby player who needs to be ready to move at any particular time. So look at his feet; they're quite flat. His body language is not presenting himself as though he could move and accelerate quickly. So this is what you want to try and encourage coaches to do, is to notice all those small things, not the winning and losing, but how people are performing in that environment, not the outcome, but the process. And if you look in the bottom screen, which I'll play a little bit more. Sorry. Oh. Technical hitch here. Look at the bottom right of the screen. Okay. So in the bottom right of the screen was someone who's not involved in the game, but was extremely animated by the whole process. Really excited, really drove his team on, really enthusiastic, and celebrated with a real energy. And what I did when that session finished is I went up to him and said, I was really pleased with the contribution you gave to your team. He said, what do you mean? I said, well, I was watching the whole of the event. I watched all the participants in the activity. I watched the communication. I watched the footwork. I watched the acceleration. I watched the teamwork. But most of all, what stood out was your reaction. And he felt very pleased that his effort and his contribution had been noticed. So noticing is a broad brush across all of what you see in front of you. What things can you pick out? And even it's the smallest thing can make the biggest difference. Now, I know I've jumped ahead a couple of times with the speed of slides, but I'll just show the next one and then we'll see if there's any questions. So this clip here, I do some work in professional cycling. So what you've got is the banked velodrome in the background. A group of coaches from different countries of the world at a coaching seminar, and a coach in the middle of the group teaching them a yoga exercise. So if I just show you the video clip and just see what you noticed. I'm going to play it once more, and I think I'll just see if Matt can see if there's anything that people can contribute for. Just if there's a box they can put any comments. And I'll play it once more, just see what you notice. So in this clip here, I'll show you. Here's again. So three very different elements shown in this noticing aspect. The first one was the freeze frame, the picture. We go back to it here. The picture. There's a snapshot image. What did I notice in there? What could I draw from that? The second one, really dynamic environment, so much going on. You throw it out to coaches, they'll draw different things. Some will see the same, some will do different things. But remember what I noticed in there was the non-participants as well as the participants. And then from this one, if I just show it once more. So when you look at this, you look at the total engagement of the participants. Around the outside was a junior world track program training before the World Championships, which would take place in the following month. And they've been training around there for sort of about half an hour. And the coaches who were watching the activity were totally engaged in the coach teaching them yoga. No one was distracted. So it shows me the importance of being able to provide a session where you've got full engagement and attention and focus of those people within that group. Such was the coaching instruction, such was the environment that they were able to learn without distraction. There's so much going on in this small space here. Let's go back again to this one. I won't play it again, but from a learning aspect, there's so much to learn. There's acceleration from the start. There's agility, there's communication, there's problem solving, decision making. So it's a really decision rich learning environment. So how do you manage that? What will you take away from it? In this, I let the players make the decisions. I simply gave them the rules, but they were totally empowered to problem solve. And with here, when you're learning, really important, we try and minimize distraction so we can allow focus on what it is we want people to learn. Now, when Matt started the presentation again, it's really important that whilst there is different aspects of the seminars, there's also overlap, and that's what Matt alluded to. You don't have to have attended the first one to understand the second one, but there is some overlap. We talk a lot about relatedness. Sometimes it's called purposeful practice. Sometimes it's called context. And so we'll engage the learner if we give them clear understanding as to why we're doing what we're doing. If I do this, what will it enable me to perform better at? How is this helping me? So what you've got from the slide is a gym setup for Scottish canoeing. So I went up there about 6 months ago to work with one of their Paralympians. So to the right of the screen, you can see this canoeist called Hope Gordon. So she was an amputee rower transferring to para canoeing. So he spent the morning in the water, and when you're canoeing, the obviously technique is very different from rowing. A lot more instability created. So after about 20 minutes, the boat capsized, and Hope was in the water. Prosthetic limb was unable to be used again until it dried out. So the first thing I noticed, I said, well, we need to work on your balance. Balance stood out as an area that we really needed to work on. We didn't go back in the water because we already got cold in the morning. So I thought, okay, what can we do in the gym this afternoon that is related to what we want you to do overall in your performance? So we thought, that's what we do. So you can see on the image here, how can we make Hope really unstable to practice in the gym so we can enhance her stability. So we started off with her sitting on the floor, catching a ball. We're going to just show a little clip now. So we're throwing tennis balls at her. Sounds quite random. But what we want to try and do is stimulate a reaction that is similar to the paddling technique in the canoe. So I'll just play it through once more. Okay, so we're trying to catch the tennis ball in the same position as we would have the upper part of the stroke. So the Bosu here, the half Swiss ball, the blue shape under her foot, represented the front of the boat, and the Swiss ball, which he sat on, represented the seat in the boat and the stability that was caused. The external stimulus, which was the ball, was designed to throw off her balance as much as possible. Because if you can become off balanced and then address that balance quickly, then that is part of that learning process. Now we came up with that activity. We sort of played around the gym for about sort of 20 minutes, half an hour. Used a bit of kit, and this is what we came up with: tennis ball, Swiss ball, and what's called a bosu, which is half a Swiss ball. Now, Hope Gordon had been at the previous Paralympics in Rio, and so when you're dealing with somebody who's on that pathway, it's really important that you ensure that everything you do has got rationale and purpose and is explained to them, but also they can contribute to it as well. So they can, Hope could relate to this. The coach I work with could relate to it. And as you can see from there, was real transfer. This will transfer to when I get into the boat. And also just reduce that risk of capsizing, prepared it better for the water. You know, it wasn't particularly pleasant getting in the water, certainly with a prosthetic limb getting in and out of the water. So we tried a lot of dry land work before we went back into the boat. Okay, so the first four, we create a positive environment. We've established a good rapport with those we work with. We look at all the aspects in that environment to be aware of. Small cues from those we're coaching. What are they feeding back to us? What are we feeding back to them? What have we noticed and said to them? And then make sure that whatever we do has a real purpose. So the next one is stretch. I kind of learnt this from a coach a year and a half ago, really, when we were talking about how can we kind of bring the element of competition into our coaching without using that word competition. So we talk a lot about challenge, give coaching challenges. How do we stretch participants to prevent the flatlining? So we don't really want to go to a coaching session and not feel we're progressing, not feel we're stretched. The reason I put stretch because I think it just allows you to consider how much you can extend your participant. How well do I know them? We don't want to lose their confidence. So confidence comes from achieving success, and loss of confidence sometimes is when expectation exceeds outcome. So it's really important to understand the individual level of performance, where they're at, and develop programs that stretch accordingly. So I went to a school just north of London last summer. They have a golf program at the school. So we looked at providing the challenge cards, which you can see in red. And then we just got a whiteboard, a short whiteboard, and we wrote some things on there. Practice 20 shots in the bunker, 7 iron off the tee, and just 2 put on the green. Now, those challenges, those stretch opportunities, can be coach-led, coach and player-led, or player-led. If it's player-led, it gives them an idea of I would like to do, I feel I'm ready for, but also when it's in collaboration, it very much the learning is, very much more is deeper because that's a shared goal between both coach and athlete. I'd like to do, I want to reflect on my previous performance, and this is what I want to work on. Okay, so how can we provide something from the course into a small stretch session? So the variety there is one is a working on a particular skill, variety important, different situations. One is by the green, one is on the green, and one is getting towards the green. So those are the 3 challenges that we set a participant. Okay. So what does this look like in practice? This was decided by, these are tennis coaches. It's a 3-ball challenge. Just have a look at the interaction here. Sorry. Okay, so where did this stretch come? Again, it was, as I reflected on the first part, started off with 1-ball, collaboration with the coaches and myself, and then me also saying, I bet you can't. I wonder if you can. That kind of dialogue that gives them that challenge, gives them a little bit of an incentive to go from 1-ball challenge to 3. So this basically, when we watch it again, is a 3-ball challenge where you pass to the same person every time and you receive from the same person every time. Context, so you've got accuracy of movement, accuracy of passing, footwork, attentional focus, speed of reaction time. So you can see in that stretch, it's not a game for a game's sake, but it's, watch it once more. Okay, so if we were to reflect upon this one clip from the 5 themes we've shown so far, if I go to the noticing, just look at this player here to the left of the screen, the one with the red shoes. Look at his movement compared to the movement of others. Just see if you can notice anything different.
Not moving his feet at all.
Okay, so we've noticed that. Let's have a look at it again. I want you to look at the lady in the bottom left now and see if you can make a comparison between the two. This is where the art of noticing comes in. What do I notice from what's happening in front of me? So if we're to create a really effective learning environment, it needs to be reflected in how much attention we pay to what's happening in front of us. So when I showed this to some coaches, we called this player here Mr. Bare Minimum. If you looked at how he moved, look at he was flat-footed, did the minimum amount of work he could do to achieve the task. If you look in the bottom left, we really commended the effort, as you can see from the player here, their footwork, their anticipation, okay, moving around, even though they just were performing the same skill every time, their stance, posture, reaction time really reflected the energy and the movement patterns we wanted to get. Whereas here, the gentleman in the middle, Mr. Bare Minimum, you see, flat-footed, the way he's facing, just only facing the way he's receiving the ball, where he's going to pass it to, real minimum, okay? And we reflected upon this, we showed them afterwards and said, look, these are the important things. If we're going to stretch you, okay, let's make it achievable. Let's set the goal we can get. And as you can see, they managed to achieve that. There's a couple of errors at the end, but 30 seconds of intense effort was what we wanted. But also within that, we talk about creation emotional experiences. So all of the things that we've spoken about so far, actually in this one video, listening to the noise of the participants, noticing the people involved, what they do and what they don't do, recognizing the effort, and also the collaboration, so the relationships. These people, they work together, they've known each other at one time. So it's actually, remember, the connection is strong. Just look at the interaction between others before we go on to the next task. And it's purposeful. Again, look at the footwork of the tennis players in terms of, is this reflective of what's needed in the game? And right at the end, when it eventually sort of went wrong, right at the end again, what was your reaction to that? We talked about creating emotional experiences, even when something didn't go quite right. Again, how was it? What was the reaction to that? So this one clip, it's a tough activity. I've never seen it done. I didn't think they could do it. So I set them that challenge. How can we stretch ourselves? And they decided to choose that one. Okay. Really important in learning is not always look at outcomes, but look at effort. So one of the conversations that I relay to some of the coaches in terms of learning is the parent who takes the son home from a soccer match and says, well, did you score? And the child says, no, Dad, I never score because I'm the goalkeeper. I've been coming here for 12 weeks. So really it's about, what are those conversations that parents have to children, coaches have to children, and children recognize? So in terms of the learning process, it is not linear. It's certainly a process of acceleration where we move forward quickly, then we stall. But what's going on in that process of learning that we could celebrate? So effort's important. Saracens Rugby they talk about, we give you the skills, you give us the effort. And I think that's a really nice little phrase to think about, because when we're learning, there's a tremendous amount of effort and sometimes not a lot of outcome that's successful. So if we purely look on outcomes, I've just been brought a cup of tea. I'd thought to share that with you. If you purely focus on outcomes, then it's a very different dialogue. It only looks at, did we succeed or did we fail? And we certainly know that there's a lot of failure on the way to achieving what we want to achieve. So those conversations, that recognition, that noticing really enhances learning. I've noticed you now do this differently. I noticed you tried hard to. And that's really, really essential to learning, is that we actually can recognize success as an individual measure. So this is one of my students from last year. Hopefully, here it is. Just have a look at this. Okay, so I wouldn't try this at home. I wish I could only do one of those, but when we talk about recognized effort, and in the last webinar, we spoke about it being the right challenge. Is it the right task for that person? So when Jacob did this task, it was one that he chose. He's a butterfly swimmer. We went to an indoor climbing center, looking at challenge, looking at stretch, and you can just see here the effort that's gone into it. So in terms of learning, and effort, we're driven to learn by things that we want to do, the motivation to learn something. So in this case with Jacob, the motivation was to go up those ladders on the wall. So we can direct effort towards something that we want and something that is achievable and attainable. And effort starts to dissipate when it's something that we don't really see the relevance of. In other words, we can't relate to it. It's not something that's presented to us in a way that is meaningful. In other words, if you do this, this will help you. And also along the way, that whilst Jacob can go up all of those, I think there's 8 on there. Well, if he just did 1, we could celebrate that. The challenge would be then next time you come, do 2. So I was working with some physio students and started to bring the coaching skills into physio. How can you articulate the skills required to perform certain rehab exercises delivered in a coaching way? And I was teaching the physios to juggle. And I said, how are you getting on? And one of the students said to me, well, to be honest, I'm not even 1 out of 10. I said, okay. I said, well, what's going to make you 1? And when you get to 1, what's going to make you 2? So you start to build up the learning based upon the performance you see, step by step, at the pace of the learner. As I said before, you can enhance learning, but there's no time attached to it. I'm sure all golfers will know that from the players that you work with who've been playing the game 10, 20, 30 years, who, have we mastered it? What does mastery look like? So we need to recognize effort. How much have I tried to change? Was the learning goal that was set to me achievable? Was it presented in a way that I can actually see myself practicing that and gaining confidence because I can see a difference now that wasn't there before? I assume that the players you work with spend more time without you than they do with you. So really important in terms of learning is how much of the work that you've given them have they been able to achieve on their own. So it's quite a nice little task to set one of your players you're working with. Remember the stretch cards? Okay, I'm going to set you this challenge. It could be a particular context. It could be work on the green from the fairway, and allow them to overcome that challenge. One of the things about learning, the harder the effort, the deeper the learning, the less that we push information onto our players or to our learners, the less they own that learning. So that struggle actually deepens the learning. So it's almost taking a step back. So, okay, this is what I want you to do. Step back and watch. And I think the fear sometimes is that the coach has to be present. I've got to have this presence where I am saying, talking, becoming involved, helping. But actually, the coaching can be actually standing from the sidelines, not saying anything, allowing the learner to struggle. It sounds not necessarily a helpful word, but we'll call it a struggle, applying effort and saying, look, I did that myself. I understood how to do that. I tried it. When they revisit you after the session, they've been coaching and they've been on the course in between coaching sessions. How do you get over that challenge I set you? Okay, I did that on my own. And that's a real sense of achievement. That is a very, very positive learning experience. This card is from if we go back 2 slides, I set my students this challenge of completing a jigsaw with all the counties of England, Wales, and Scotland. Most of my students aren't really from anywhere further north than London. So an understanding of the different counties in the UK was quite a challenge. There's 47 pieces, I think, 47 pieces. And I said, do you want any help? And they said, no, we want to solve it ourselves. They wanted the struggle. And I said, explain what it is. And they just left a note at the end of the session on their learning feedback. And it was this: we don't want your support because we want to feel that we have completed this task on our own. Okay, so this is quite an unusual slide. There isn't a video to go with it, but I'll explain. So in the picture, you may not recognize, but to the left is one of the heads of UK Coach Education. The middle is the lady in waiting of the lady on the right. The lady on the right is Princess Anne, Prince Charles' sister, the Queen's daughter. I ran a play session at a coaching conference, a UK coaching conference last year. So we ask our learners, our participants, the ones we spend time with coaching, to try to show efforts, but also good learning environments come around about being brave to try new things. We don't tread water, we just tread water, we stay still. So how can I, again, become brave, stretch myself, show courage? Show courage comes a bit with that fear of failure. Okay, I may fail, but I'm going to show courage. So if I taught you through the slide, it was where there's an activity, it's called the thumbs game, which you may have played or may have seen some of the social media postings that have come in the last year. So I was told that Princess Anne would be in my session on play. I was asked to describe what would be in the session. And I said, well, we're going to be doing these various different games. And they said, well, it's unlikely that she'd like to take part. And I said, that's okay, but I'm not going to change the content of what I'm doing because this is a play session, so we're going to play. And sure enough, 5 minutes later, the whole room, we're playing the thumbs game. I shan't describe it over the webinar because it's very much a visual rather than descriptive piece. But I think if we really are courageous as coaches and want our players, participants to be courageous, we embrace failure. We embrace that it could go wrong, but it doesn't mean that stops us from going forwards. It doesn't mean that we freeze. So learning is about stretching. Learning is about being brave. Learning is about one next step. And I think if we can reflect that as a coach, we can certainly embody that when we want our players to do the same. Okay, a phrase often said, never stop learning. Well, I didn't really want it to be a throwaway comment. I wanted it to be something that I embraced. I just didn't do a slide on a PowerPoint presentation and think, well, we're talking about learning. It's for other people because I'm a coach and I kind of understand learning. And so then the next slide really made me aware that it is a continual process of learning. Effective learning environments are ones where they never stay the same. There's always something, always a cue from the group in front of us, the individual, that makes us think about our practice. So this is a picture of my daughter proudly walking out of McDonald's at the age of 8. We have a new dog, so I couldn't go into the McDonald's with her. So I gave her my bank card. Kitty is very familiar with how to order a plain cheeseburger, a medium Fanta and medium fries. So I stood outside, watched her go in, watched her operate the machine and order her food. She turned across just to make sure I was there. The ticket came out, and when it was time to go, went up, collected her food with a ticket in hand, and proudly walked out. And what did I learn from that? Well, I learned actually very close to home that if I'm going to talk about learning and effective learning, where does that come from in kind of my world? And I thought, well, actually, it wasn't the moment that she bought the McDonald's on her own. It was the moments that preceded that in the weeks beforehand when we were with her, when she learned how to operate the machine, and then she learned to use my card, and then she was made to feel confident and that we weren't overbearing, that we're just allowing her to do a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. And then, I felt in of all environments, the McDonald's that was a place where I actually reflected and thought, well, actually, coaching is a process of letting go, where you want that learner to set sail and be less dependent upon you, to show signs of the learning which you have given them. And so, so I added this one at the end, the McDonald's slide, because I thought actually it's fresh in my mind, and it was a real reflection of what I learned. And so these were the 8 aspects from that presentation. And what I wanted to say really, and not at the end, but just before if there's any questions, that these 8 themes have come from applied practice, have come from coaching, and have also come from teaching and learning. How do we learn, and how do we transfer that to coaching? So I suppose if I was to pick one of my favorite clips from all of those, which I showed before I finish, and happy to see if any questions that Matt's got for me. We learn best when we have a positive emotional experience. We attach good memories, we attach positive emotions. It makes us want to do more. We relive it in detail. So if I was asked you about the best holiday you ever went on, then you could almost talk about it as though it was an occurrence that happened yesterday. And that's really important with learning, because it is rich, and it is one that we can almost touch each time we're asked to recall it. I have a good relationship with the people I coach, a good relationship with the people I teach. This was a foundation of the next step. Connection over content. I learn best if I have a good relationship with the person who is the one coaching me. I trust their knowledge, I trust their approach, but what they did was took time to understand me, understand how we could go forwards. There was a coach, Nick Kennedy, used to be at London Irish Rugby Club, and he said, the problem with academy players, you ask them a question, they give you a rugby answer. So I said to him, I'm going to give you a question now. I don't want a rugby answer. I want to know a little bit more about you. And it was actually going beyond the performance environment, wanting to know a little bit what made them tick outside of rugby. Take more notice. Well, from the lady with the tag on the back of her shirt, to the lad at the bottom of the screen who was jumping up and down, to the lad in the middle of the screen who was standing very still on a acceleration, a very important transition agility exercise. All of those things are in front of you. What cues are you reacting to? What cues are they reacting to? And how things change when you do take more notice. And it isn't so much about outcome. A lot of it is about behavior. When Elliot, the student at the bottom of the screen, knew that I'd taken notice of his enthusiasm, you could see it made a real difference to his engagement. Relatedness. So where's the why? Why are we doing this? And if you can't answer that, I sometimes wonder how you're going to expect people to learn effectively if you're doing something without real purpose. So you can see from the Paralympic canoe that the tennis ball has been thrown at her in the gym had real transfer to the context of the open water. Stretch. Think about stretch over competition. How could I just extend you a little bit more? Just another 10%, a bit further. One extra step. You can see from the tennis players that stretch. We start with 1 ball, ready for 2, then we'll go to 3. And you can see the golf examples. Recognize effort. Really important conversation. I saw what you did. I noticed how much effort you put in. It's a very, very important conversation. Certainly when you get if you're dealing with parents, that can sometimes be a challenge when the questions are not always helpful. It's about saying to the parent, listen, we're focusing on this today, and I want you to look at that, because that's where we are trying to improve the performance. And show courage is, I'm a courageous coach. I try new ideas. I'm trying to be creative and innovative. Hopefully those slides, all the slides you saw were from my coaching practice. I wanted to try new things. There's real diversity in that. Yeah, and yes, there's been balloons that have literally gone on the floor. But I think if we want to develop a positive learning environment, we have to make people feel brave to try things they've not done before. They're stepping off. And it isn't a McDonald's sponsored slide, I have to say, but the never stop learning is, why you guys have logged on tonight, and really appreciate you showing interest in the presentation. And thanks, Matt, for the invitation, because it's always great to share the ideas that I think have helped me come a long way in coaching. And if you can take one or two of these things away to your practice and the players will benefit, then I think that's what we're all trying to achieve. The videos are not easy to share, but I'm happy to share all the slides with Matt to pass on to those who've logged on if you wanted them emailing. And at the bottom of the screen, top of the screen actually, is my email address if you wanted to send me anything directly, and also with Matt if Matt wanted to pass my details on.
Absolutely. Richard, if you have maybe just a couple minutes for a couple questions, there's
Sure.
one just asking any books that you would recommend given the theme of what you presented here.
Yeah, there's a great book called Make It Stick, which is about the science of learning. So it's called Make It Stick. There's a book called Coaching Better Every Season by Wade Gilbert. Those are two of the ones which I'd really recommend, because one is from a coaching context and one is from a learning context. And I think that's important that we understand the sort of overlap between the two. I found both of those really beneficial, just from an aspect of making sure there is a real synergy between learning and coaching. There's also one of my favorite books, which is called 14 Great Coaches by Chris Triest. Learn the lessons, improve your coaching, and have a lasting impact. So Chris Triest, spelled Trieste. So those are the three books which I would recommend. So one, the Chris Triest book is because it's coaches' narratives. These are our stories. One's the Make It Stick is the sort of science of learning, and the work by Dr. Will Gilbert is a nice broad brushstroke across coaching practice.
Fantastic. Thanks again, Richard. There's a good comment there from our friend Mike Vanderwolf just about his team and relating this to them. But again, as Richard said, I'm happy to connect any of you with his details and connect the dots. Really smart guy and some great content. So appreciate you taking the time today, Richard.